Hugh Newman takes companions to the heights of Glastonbury, to the pyramids of Guatemala, to the volcanoes of Hawaii. His fascination ranges from decoding the mysteries of the dolphins to exploring the changes in our DNA. So today Hugh is going to expand our vocabulary and our consciousness. So please give a warm Inside Edge welcome to Hugh Newman.
Thank you very much, and it's a real privilege to be here, to be talking in LA of all places. Oh, now you tell me. Okay, because I actually came over here just before the election, a few days before the Obama election, I think it's called now, and I was speaking at a conference in New England, the Earth Spirit Conference. I don't know if any of you have ever been up to Vermont and been to that event. It's quite remarkable. And I was here, and I was here for this whole sort of, 80-day, 70-day period before Obama got inaugurated yesterday. So it's been a really interesting time for me, and I feel quite inspired because, as we all know, Obama isn't just the President of America. It really is something to do with the whole planet, and people are responding all around the planet to this. And I think it is a real potential shift in consciousness that he's going to be witness to and be a part of. And he's also going to be there for 2012, isn't he? December. He's actually going to be, although he may not be in office technically on December the 21st, 2012, he'll actually be the president until January the 21st or whatever. So that's interesting for me because I'm quite interested in the Mayan calendar. But anyway, I digress. I'll get back to the point of why I'm here. I haven't got long, so I should really get on. So I'm here to talk about the research I've been doing for many years now, and it's to do with ancient sites and specifically Earth grids and how sites all around the planet seem to connect up into this remarkable geometric harmonic pattern. My real interest was Earth energies and how the ancient sites seem to have this connection with Earth energies. And I'm a dowser. I've studied geomancy, and I came across all these different books, especially The Sun and the Serpent by Paul Broadhurst and Hamish Miller. And being from England, obviously, there's a lot of sites to choose from. So some of the things that we're going to have a quick look at today are, I'll just enlarge this slightly, excuse me. So obviously, when we're looking at Earth energies and we're looking at sacred sites around the planet, we have to look at geomagnetism, because this is a key part of anything to do with Earth energies, and especially megalithic sites and pyramids and so forth. We're looking at, there's a lot of ancient ideas, there's ancient maps, like very ancient maps that sort of have a great understanding of the planet, and they've mapped coastlines from Antarctica, and the Pires-Res map is one, for example. The ley line system, I mean, we all know about ley lines here, I guess. Yeah, most people do. We'll have a quick look at that as well, because basically when we're looking at grids, we're actually looking at lays or ley lines which extend all around the planet. And this is remarkable in itself, because were the ancients actually surveying the planet in ancient times? How did they do it, if they were doing it? I mean, this is one of the questions is really the focus of my research. There's all the different types of grids that people have come up with. And one of the most interesting things for me is this whole idea of how Earth energies have been harnessed by the ancients. And there's a lot of sites in America, which I've personally visited now, where there's proof now that there's some of these ancient sites, these dolmens and megalithic chambers, and even petroglyph sites as well, in Arizona and New Mexico and so forth, are actually part of this system of generating fertility and enhancing seeds and grains and stuff. We'll have a quick look at that, and there's a whole new area of sort of Earth energy science. Obviously, when we're looking at grids, we have to look at sacred geometry and the platonic solids, so we'll run through that. And the far side of the grid, there's a lot of very unusual associations with the grid, from like unusual vortexes, even the Bermuda Triangle is part of the sort of main grid system as well. And we really must ask, what were the ancients really up to? Were they really planning and working around the whole planet? Were they doing a great survey of the planet? Were they mapping it? Who were these people? I mean, this is the question. No one really knows who these are. I know you've had Graham Hancock here before, and I don't know if he talked to you about his ancient civilizations research. But he's really one of the big inspirations for me and many other sort of more modern researchers about this, because there's a big question mark over our prehistory when you go back beyond the Neolithic, beyond 5,000 years. So, if we're looking at the Earth to start with, we have to look at the geomagnetic field, because there's a lot of, it gets affected so intensely. In some of these graphics here, you can see the way the sun affects the magnetic field and creates this huge fluctuations in it. And often what happens is, as you probably know, field lines occur in the mornings as the sun rises. We have, it's almost like earth energy lines that are of the magnetic field. But because they're traveling through the surface of the Earth, they have an electric sort of quality to them, so they're called telluric currents. And this is part of the system that many of the ancient megalithic sites seem to incorporate and sort of link up between these sites. This is just a map of the magnetic flow lines of the planet, coming from the north and south magnetic poles, which are obviously different from the geographic poles. And you can see the different, how sort of crazy it can be. But also you can see that, to me, I sort of see a harmony within that as well, that there's a constant flux between the two. And I think the ancients had a subtle understanding of this and could feel this, because we look at geomancy, you can, just through dowsing, and a lot of people can just do it through their body now. They can actually feel and sense different fluctuations in the magnetic field, when there's electric charge in the atmosphere, there's different weather conditions and so forth. So I believe the ancients had this understanding. If we zoom in a bit to some sites, on the left there, this shows you the magnetic variations. I don't know if you can all see this. This shows you the magnetic variations around a rock chamber up in New England at Kent Cliffs in New York State. This is actually a graphic that was in John Burke's book, Seed of Knowledge, Stone of Plenty. And it shows you how there's a major magnetic anomaly right in the entrance to this megalithic chamber. And so why would they, it's almost like that was there before, and then they chose to build the site upon this. On the right-hand side, we have, this is actually Stonehenge, and the lighter areas, the whiter areas in the image, show where there's been a lot of electric charge, electric current that's gone through the ground over millennia, since it was being built, obviously. And it suggests that the ancients and the builders were working with this for a purpose, because they were working with this energy to try and bring it into the sites and to use it for a certain purpose, probably many purposes, because this type of energy has not only effects on the body, like a healing effect, but on the mind, you have altered states of consciousness, but also when you place seeds within these areas, they become enhanced and charged up, and then when you go and plant them, you get higher yield and better quality crop. And so this is all really at the sort of early parts of agriculture. And then we get the orb phenomenon as well. And these are just a couple of photos. There's one of me there looking a bit silly at this. That's actually in New York State. This is Balanced Rock. I don't know if any of you have been there. This is massive. This is one of the largest dolmens I've ever seen. And I've been traveling the world looking for these. And this is the largest, one of the largest ones in the world. This is a 90-ton boulder placed upon 4 or 5 smaller stones. It's remarkable, and yet the official story is, obviously, that it's a glacial erratic that landed there on these 4 boulders very neatly, and it just happens to be on a very powerful negative magnetic anomaly. So why would they choose that's a nice one, God. And you can see these orbs as well in the photo, and this has been photographed as well by John Burke and his researchers, and they've been studying this kind of idea. And a lot of people get very strange things happen around this stone. And we asked all the locals when we visited there a couple of months ago. And suddenly we've got all these orbs appearing there as well. And this is a classic thing when you're looking at certain sites. The reason this is we're coming round to the Earth grids thing, but the reason this gets me is because you get dolmens and you get other kind of, sites such as this all over the world where the orb photographs keep appearing. And people have these light phenomena appearing. And it seems to be this network of sites and somehow harnessing this energy that we have no idea about anymore. We've got electricity now. We don't need, the subtle energies of the Earth. We can barely feel them because we're so bombarded by electromagnetic pollution and electricity. This one down here is a rock chamber It's in Massachusetts. I can't remember exactly where it is. I've got it all in my notes, but I've visited about 20 of them. And I think there's literally hundreds of these megalithic rock chambers in New England. I visited as many as I could. And some of the stones in there, some of the slabs over the top are up to 30 tons, some of them. And so I don't believe they're colonial root cellars, which is what the official line is. I don't think they would bother lifting 30-ton blocks just to put some, whatever to store. And again, we get the ball of light phenomenon as well. Virtually every chamber I went to, I photographed my friend who had a different camera to me and another friend as well. We all kept getting photos with these balls of light actually inside the centre or the entrance to the chambers. So you must have, this orb phenomenon is sort of having a global effect. Then we have the plasma bands on the far right at the bottom there. You can see this plasma band effect as well. This is a photo by John Burke from the book pictured above. And what we're finding is chambers, especially chambers or domes, anything with a roof, but even you get it with pyramids and flat-topped pyramids as well, like mounds, earth mounds, which you get huge. I think there's something like 5,000 or 6,000 earthen mounds in America, especially the whole Mississippi region, which I haven't had a chance to properly look at yet, and right down to Florida. But there seems to be electrical charge occurring, and this is why you get these photographs. And the thing is, the dolmens, the chambers, these are evident all around the planet. And we'll have a quick look at some more images of that. But one of the key, we have to ask what the reason for this is. And one of the key reasons which John Burke and Kaj Halberg, and I must credit them with this, and I'm being in touch with them, and I'm sort of working with them soon to sort of develop and work more on their research. They found that when seeds are placed at these chambers, because there's also many legends of tribes, especially in North America, visiting these sites from hundreds of miles away often and placing the seeds there at sunrise as a ceremonial offering for the gods to produce more grain for them or whatever, for their cultures, their tribes. And there's actually a scientific basis behind this now, that when you go and place these seeds at these sites, and then go and plant, only for about an hour perhaps, and then when you go and plant them, just against controls that haven't been within these chambers, you often get a yield which is sometimes 4 times the amount of yield you would expect from the controls, and they grow often quicker. They become frost resistant, and you get it's like a ancient agricultural technology we're looking at here. And the thing is, there's evidence of this all around the planet, like everywhere. And we're looking at the oldest cultures here. We're not just looking at the more modern Bronze Age. We're looking at the early Neolithic, and possibly before that. Up on the top right, there's an image of Tikal, the Lost World Pyramid in Tikal, for instance, which is a much older pyramid. Potentially, it was an Olmec construction, who then, there's theories that they actually taught the Mayans all the calendars and all this kind of stuff. But the much older pyramids, when they did the tests there and put the seeds on top and then planted them, this is the difference they got in the yields and the quality between a control and ones they placed on the pyramid. But then when they placed them on the pyramids which were newer, which is the ones pictured there, in fact, which are much later construction by the later Mayans, and they tried them there, nothing happened. The controls were the same as the ones placed on the pyramid. So again, we're finding evidence of the older the megalithic kind of construction, the more profound this technology seems to work. This is just some dolmens pictured around the world. Obviously, North America, we have quite a few of them. Wales, Tunisia, but obviously Britain, France, Jordan. There's some in Japan and China, the Middle East, India. They're everywhere, and they all have a very similar size and design. And these are excellent for this kind of work, because they trap the energies within them when there's a magnetic fluctuations in the Earth, and this electrical charge has the potential to manifest there. And this is where often, and I believe there was an ancient civilization, which Graham Hancock talks about, that were traveling the world and they were teaching these things. This is also evident when we look at these great energy currents that run through southern England. This is the famous Michael and Mary Earth energy currents, which was originally a straight line alignment that was discovered by John Michell in the late 60s, because he just worked it out on a map that there's all these sites dedicated to St Michael stretching across southern England. And then Hamish Miller and Paul Broadhurst, which is documented in their book The Sun and the Serpent, went and dowsed these lines to see if there was any Earth energies present, because it was quite a big thing in the 80s in England to find these Earth energies connected with these so-called ley lines. And they found these great, two massive, sort of 10-foot wide, they fluctuate at different sizes, two different energy currents weaving like Caduceus around this particular ley line, this straight line alignment. And they found this. And immediately when I saw this, and this was a breakthrough book for me, it was a breakthrough book in the whole Earth Mysteries world, I just thought, well, where's the rest of it? Because this is just England. It must be a global current. And then Hamish Miller, I found out that he actually found the current continuing up in St. Petersburg in Russia. And I kind of worked, I kind of thought, well, okay, that's interesting. And I kept wondering about this for a few years. Then I came across this map, which is the Rainbow Serpent sort of Earth chakra map, which is something that Robert Kuhn, who's also a Glastonbury resident, which I currently kind of am, and he came up with this global version. You can see it here. You can see how the one that loops over like that is the one that goes through England. And it also goes right through the Atlantic, through South America and Lake Titicaca. And there's another one as well. So there's these two great energy currents. And there's more about this in the book I've done, the Earth Grids book, so I'm going more into detail about different parts of it. But it just shows you that there is this potential for these great energy currents around the planet, and whether they're natural, whether they were harnessed, it was just they were kind of natural and they were all over the place, whether they were harnessed by the megalithic builders, which they seem to be when we look at sites upon them. It really is a big question about this, and it really intrigues me. So I went and tested this out because I wanted to sort of go and find this out for myself. So I went to Lake Titicaca in Peru about a year or so ago, and on the north part of the island I came across this, which is another dolmen-like structure. Actually, you'll see that there's a square block with all these. I think these are later, these smaller blocks. But underneath it, the one in the ground, that is a huge, massive megalith, the one sort of curved in the ground that it's standing on itself, and it goes way under the surface. I was interested in this because there's a great energy line that went through this. Actually, this is the path it went through. I'm kind of standing on it when I took this photo. And you may notice at the back, the rocky outcrop there actually looks like a frog. I don't know if anyone can see that. And underneath its chin, there's loads of offerings have been made there. And apparently I found out that it's an Inca site, which they still use. And it goes way back. And the frog, to some of the Inca sort of civilization, was revered as a fertility symbol. And so, again, we're coming back to this idea of fertility and placing seeds and offerings underneath these places where the earth energies are strongest. And that's actually where the Rainbow Serpent, or the Michael energy line, and the other energy line we saw in the picture cross. So again, we're seeing sort of elements of fertility in earth energies. And at the southern part of the island, the Mary line, which is the other line that we saw in the British map, goes through there. And this just shows you the map of where they come all the way from England, but there's two of them weaving in and out of each other. And this is how it goes through the island. If we draw the map we saw of England, if we draw the straight line and continue it through the Atlantic, through South America, it goes directly through the middle of the island. We checked all this out on Google Earth. We kind of studied, we did all the maths, and worked this out, and found that the energy lines, like they do in England, weave in and around. So again, we're seeing evidence of global understandings here. This is another great ley as well, a great ley line, which was, again, worked on by John Michel, and then, again, it was dowsed by Hamish Miller and Paul Broadhurst. It's called the Apollo St. Michael axis, and it's all to do with ancient Greece and the oracle centres, and Delos, Dodona, and Delphi, all roughly in a line, and it's been considered that they were built on an alignment stretched across the landscape, and then John Michel and Christine Rohn and others worked with this and found that it's actually a 2,500 mile ley line, which goes through hundreds of sites all the way up to the St. Michael sites in Britain and France, Mont Saint Michel, St. Michael's Mount, and the island as well. Yeah, on the left up there, yeah. Yeah, pretty much. And these three lines here, as you can see, going across left to right. Well, another interesting aspect of this, which echoes the grid research, is that they're exactly 1 degree of latitude apart from each other, Delphi, Dodona, and Delos, which again is an evidence of ancient surveying techniques. And we can see this as well when we look at Giza, for instance, because Giza is pretty much 30 degrees above the equator, which is 1/6 of the way around the planet. When we look at Avebury in England, the greatest stone circle in the world, which is so large they built a village inside it. It's that big. It's way bigger than Stonehenge, if any of you haven't been there yet. And that sits, if you go from the equator and around the planet, back to the equator, sort of around the top like that, it's exactly 1/7 of the way around the planet. So it's 51 something degrees latitude. And with Luxor, and then if you divide, I'm going to get a little bit technical here. Is it too early for this, perhaps? Could be. It's too early for me, for sure. But if you go from the equator to the North Pole, that's like a quadrant section of the planet. Like Luxor, or the ancient city of Thebes in Egypt, is 2/7 of that quadrant distance up from the equator. And Avebury is 4/7 of the quadrant distance up from the equator. We're not talking roughly here, we're talking absolutely precisely, the centre of the sites. So again, we're seeing this sort of evidence of latitudinal surveying happening here. And if we zoom into Avebury and the whole kind of landscape around Stonehenge and Avebury, which are really quite close to each other, we see that between 51 and 52 degrees of the 360-degree circle, from 51 up to Avebury, and then the Rollright stones, basically Avebury is, I think, 3/7 of the way between 51 and 52, if we deal with all that. I mean, to be honest with you, I think you should just have a look at the book about that, because it could take up 45 minutes just trying to describe this. But again, we're just seeing that there's evidence of ancient surveying here as well, which is one of the key points. Because if there is a grid system that the ancients were involved in working with, then we have to sort of look at these kind of details. Again, if we look at Giza, obviously the Giza pyramids, and then Newgrange in Ireland, if we draw a line between them and then continue it around the world, that is 1/10 of the way around the planet precisely. And again, if you go from Avebury to Newgrange, Newgrange is the largest kind of major megalithic site in Ireland, from Avebury to Newgrange is 1/100th of the circumference of the planet, if you draw a line around the planet between them 2 points. And we're talking precisely here. There's very accurate surveying sort of detail that was going on in ancient times with these megalithic builders. And again, we come back to Giza. When we're dealing with anything to do with grids or anything to do with placement of sites and their coordinates around the planet, we really must define a meridian. I mean, because forget the Greenwich meridian. That's nonsense. It's just an arbitrary thing, political, etc. Basically, when we go back to Giza and go straight through the Great Pyramid, which also goes through Alexandria, which is the ancient centre of learning of the ancient world, obviously, then we start noticing that all sites, when you go east and west of Giza and that the ancient prime meridian, we find there's lots of harmonic distances and degrees, and it all becomes a harmonic pattern around the planet. Graham Hancock worked this out, Karl Monk worked this out, Rand Flemath. There's all these different authors who keep coming up with the same ideas here. And it fits really neatly in with the grid research as well. It's also exactly 30 degrees above the equator as well. So obviously the ancients were working with the equator. That's one of the sort of key points here. But then we have to define a meridian north-south as well, which I believe is this. And Charles Piazzi Smythe, who was the Royal Astronomer Royal of Scotland, but also an avid Egyptologist, he I think in the 1880s or something like that, he proposed this idea that should be the prime meridian, partly because of not just the ancient sites and the way they interact with each other from there, but also because it's the centre of the landmass of the planet. If you go north, south, east and west from the Giza pyramids, have more landmass in all directions than you do from anywhere other point on the planet, which suggests that's one of the reasons it was built there in the first place. So this is actually an image from Graham Hancock's book Heaven's Mirror, which we've just messed about with a little bit for my book. But again, you can just see from this image that it shows harmonic. If we go back to Giza as the prime meridian and we measure from there east and west, we find many, many harmonic numbers, you know, divided into the 360 circle, going east and west from there. I won't go into all the details here. And below, it just shows you how Lubantum and other sites in Mexico and Guatemala are exactly 120 degrees west of Giza, which is 1/3 of the way around the planet. And then 110 degrees west, we have Quito in Ecuador, which is another ancient Inca capital. And 100 degrees west of the Great Pyramid, we have Tiwanaku in Peru, which is one of possibly, you know, some people believe this is the most ancient megalithic site on the planet. But this is up for debate. There's lots of other potentials with that as well. Here's just some examples of longitudes from Giza. Again, it's all in the book. This is just scanned in from the book. It just shows you the very accurate, very harmonic distances between sites, suggesting there was a great survey of the planet in antiquity. And again, then we look at on the right-hand page, on the right of the page here, we can see how these are the degrees numbered here between sites themselves, not from Giza, but it's between other sites. For example, I don't know if any of you have heard of the Bosnian pyramids. They found a whole complex of pyramids in Bosnia, so Eastern Europe, which is actually larger than the pyramids of Giza. And this is pretty sort of new information. But for example, the Bosnian pyramids to Machu Picchu in Peru is exactly 90 degrees, you know, which is a neat harmonic, a quarter of a circle, basically. And we see all these different ideas, and there's many more than this. This is just the tip of the iceberg. And with the book, with the research, I just look at quite well-known, large sites. I'm not looking at any smaller sites, which could also be markers for this system, global system as well. So let's just jump off planet for a moment. This is Mars, as you can see by the face on it over there. Richard Hoagland, I don't know if you've had him at your group before. I think he's absolutely brilliant. I've got a lot of respect for him. He's done some excellent research on Mars and looked at all the whole Cydonia complex on Mars and the Olympus Mons volcano, which is the largest volcano system in the solar system. And he came up with this whole idea. He kept finding all these angles in the Cydonia landscape of 19.5 degrees, or to be precise, 19.47. Which is a tetrahedral angle. When you place a tetrahedron in a sphere, the points, the vertices touch the sphere's, you know, edge at 19.47 degrees, as you can see in the image there, where there's two interlocking tetrahedra there. And you notice that the Olympus Mons, the largest volcano complex in the solar system, is actually at 19.5 degrees on Mars, you know, in comparison to the North and South Poles. On Earth, he noted that Hawaii, which is, again, a very huge volcanic complex, the most active complex, again, is at 19.5 degrees. And throughout the solar system, we find similar anomalies. We've found cloud bands on Neptune and spots on different planets, and basically energy upwellings keep appearing throughout the solar system at this latitude. And we also get it on the sun as well. We get increased solar flare activity at 19.5 degrees above and below the equator. And why would this be? You know, to me, this is a sign that there is a natural resonating, you know, cymatic type quality of geometry throughout nature, throughout the universe, going from the microcosm to the macrocosm. And I think this is evident on the planets, and this is now being researched. This is all being researched by NASA, or it's been, let's say, it's been recorded by NASA and being put together by people like Richard Hoagland into a coherent understanding of the cosmos. Again, you can just see a map of Mars there, 19.5 degrees, and how this interlocking tetrahedra seems to be present on a lot of the planets in our solar system. A lot of people link this with the whole Merkaba thing as well, which I'm sure you all heard of. But there's odd geometries on Uranus's moon as well, Miranda. I mean, check this out. I mean, we get hexagonal and pentagonal features naturally occurring on moons. What's this? And again, we get triangular patterns down the bottom there. Very clear, straight line, all photographed by NASA and the Russian Space Agency as well. So again, we're noting this idea of potential grids. And this is probably the most interesting one for me, anyway, is this hexagonal geometry, which is just maintains itself on the north pole of Saturn, and it doesn't budge. It's been there since, it's been recorded since 1981. You know, this has been around a lot. Well, it's probably been around a lot longer than that, but it's been noted and recorded since 1981 by NASA. And basically, what it is, I mean, basically, you can fit two Earths into that hexagon. It's that big. And it stays still, and all the cloud bands and all the sort of weather systems move around it, and that maintains its integrity. It doesn't budge an inch, which is really bizarre. And they can't work it. It doesn't happen on the South Pole. It just happens on the North Pole. You can see, like, the way that on the right-hand side, how the North and South Pole seem to be. This is like an enhanced photograph here. There seems to be a lot more energy upwellings there. And Saturn's moon, Iapetus, as well. This is very odd. It's got a 12-mile high and 12-mile wide ridge perfectly around the equator of the planet, of the moon. And no one knows how it got there. It's almost like someone's got a tennis ball, cut it in half, roughly glued it together. And you can see this here, and there's no explanation for that, what that could possibly be. So again, I just wanted to show you that there's, even on other planets, there's energetic potentials for grids here, and it's not just the Earth. Let's get back to Earth anyway. This is actually a map that was developed by the brilliant Buckminster Fuller. I'll just play that again, actually, because I quite like it. You probably didn't even see it. And it shows an icosahedral sort of format. You can see it just unfolds into an icosahedral format. And he worked with trying to get flat renditions of an accurate rendition of the Earth. They're called Dymaxion maps. He also did one with a cube octahedron sort of design as well, and worked with different ideas. And interestingly, soon after that, in the early 70s, Ivan Sanderson came up with this. I don't know if you... Do you ever get Ivan Sanderson in your group, perchance? Okay, he's a brilliant guy. He's not with us anymore, but he was one of the breakthroughs in grid research. Why is that funny? He made one of the big breakthroughs in grid research, and he sort of popularized the whole Bermuda Triangle thing as well. And he did lots of statistical analysis about the Bermuda Triangle and about places where there was disappearances and strange phenomena, time dilations, gravity anomalies, etc. Huge amount of weird things going on at certain places. And Bermuda Triangle is obviously the most famous one. But there's sites all around the planet which he noted and worked with and researched. After many years of research, he came up with a map similar to this, which is, I've redrawn this, obviously. And he wrote an article called The 12 Devil's Triangles Around the World. So he found these 10 sites around the planet, sort of going around the main part, and plus the North and South Pole as well. But when you look at it, when people sort of started looking at it, they noticed that straight away it's an icosahedron. It is blatantly an icosahedron. And also many of the sites sit on the Tropic of Cancer in the north of the equator, and the Tropic of Capricorn south of the equator. This is just a 3D kind of version of it. It shows you it there. So, in the centre of all these triangles, these sort of mysterious triangles, we have all these we've got the Bermuda Triangle, we've got Hawaii, Easter Island, off the coast of near Rio, etc., where lots of these strange things keep happening. So straight away, again, we're seeing evidence of energy sort of effects of geometries within celestial spheres, the Earth, which echoes similar ideas on other planets. And then we move to the Dodecahedron, which is my favourite platonic solid. And we see, this is the research done by some Russians. We'll have a look at the Russian stuff in a moment. But the Russians, when they were actually working, this is like exactly the same time as Ivan Sanderson. There was a big hoo-ha about who discovered the Earth grid first and all this kind of stuff. But basically, it was at the same time they were working. These three Russian scientists, I'm not going to try and say their names or anything, but they've discovered that using the same principles, using the geographic north and south poles, if they place a dodecahedron within the Earth, they noticed that it kind of, quite almost neatly, kind of follows the mid-Atlantic ridge. And they came up with this plan here, which was later developed by William Becker and Beth Hargens. And also echoes what Plato once said as well, that the Earth viewed from above resembles a ball sewn from 12 pieces of skin. So again, we're looking at different perspectives here, different geometries and potentials. So this is some of the original graphics from the Russian research, obviously hand-drawn, as you can tell. But again, what they did, they worked with the dodecahedron, and then they kind of thought, well, okay, let's just try placing the icosahedron over the dodecahedron, because they nest within each other, these two fundamental geometries, which we've got the dodecahedron here and the icosahedron there. And they nest within each other. The vertices or the points touch the center of the faces of the other solid, which again is probably too early to get into this kind of stuff. But once they put them together and they worked with the geographic North Poles and had the dodecahedral line going through the mid-Atlantic ridge, they found suddenly that loads of things just fell into place. There's paths of migratory animals, magnetic anomalies, strange upwellings around the planet, even sites of ancient civilizations and movements of civilizations across continents, and so on and so forth. And this kind of held its own, really, until other researchers took it a step further. This just shows you another model of the grid, of the Icosa and dodecahedron combination, which I think is one of their original drawings again, redrawn. This just shows you sort of slightly more modern version. And also it shows you the grey, darker lines. The grey lines are the plate boundaries, and the way that the arrows are where the plates kind of move within the planet itself, roughly, so very sort of basic. So we've got the tetrahedron, the icosahedron, and the dodecahedron sorted now. So now let's have a look at the cube and the octahedron, the final platonic solids. And this is the work of Bruce Cathy. Now I don't know if any of you heard of Bruce Cathy. He's a brilliant researcher. He's written loads of excellent books. He was an airline pilot. He was working in New Zealand for many, many years. He kept seeing UFOs everywhere. He kept sighting them when he was flying his planes. He met people, had reports of them, so he started plotting them, and he kept plotting them until he came up, after years and years and years, he came up with a map, which is the one on the right there, of all the different sightings that have been noted over the years. And suddenly he noticed that it forms into a grid, a very neat and tidy grid, as you can see there. But he needed some clue about how he could develop this into a global system, because he thought, well, if it's covering the whole of New Zealand, why not the rest of the planet? And so he kind of, couldn't work. For years, he couldn't quite sort of fix it to anything. He had different ideas of the North Poles, whether it was magnetic or the geographic pole, or even where the pole used to be, and so forth. And eventually, he came across this antenna-looking thing you can see up in the centre there at the top, off the coast of Cape Horn in South America. At the bottom of the sea, it's only about this big. It wasn't very big, only a few feet tall, which he thought was some ancient alien antenna that had been planted there by a distant civilization or ETs from another planet. The reason he thought this is because he often saw, when he did have UFO sightings, he saw crafts moving in and out of the sea off the coast of New Zealand. So he had this idea that there was something going on in the water. And interestingly, Ivan Sanderson wrote a book about that as well. About that whole idea of a whole underwater alien civilization, which I don't want to freak anyone out with that information. But and on the left here is once he plotted the New Zealand grid along with this antenna, he suddenly had this revelation and got his son's plastic football, soccer ball, I think you call it here, and with a pen, and kind of drew all over it. And came up with this plan here, which he later realised was a perfect cube octahedron system, which again was earlier kind of worked with Ivan Sanderson. So this was later developed by William Becker and Beth Hargens, professors. They're up in New England and Maine. They were a big inspiration for me. I've been working with them on my book a little bit. They've been sort of mentoring me with some of the research. And they came up with this. So it's a combination of the Icosa dodecahedron, but a more stable version with like ribs kind of connecting all the different points, which is called a Rhombic Triacontahedron, if anyone wants to get technical about it. And it's kind of like an exo. To me, it kind of is like an exoskeleton for the planet. And this is what's really got me, because there's all this research about dark matter in the universe has been going around for the last year or two. And it fits in with the Earth grid research. It really does, because this whole idea of dark matter is that it's like a platform, skeleton, scaffolding of the universe, and then everything evolves and grows within it. So I see this as potentially the same thing, but for the Earth. And I think they've cracked it with this idea of this particular combination of, this is actually a combination of all the different platonic solids all in one, and it's a structural form, and it fits in with the whole dark matter theory. This just shows you the sort of what their final grid system looked like, which I think is a great picture actually. But you can see here, I don't know if you can see that just there, the way that that part of South America forms around that grid point. Again, I'll quickly run over here. The Gulf of Carpentaria, I think it's called, in Australia. Just there, again, the grid point's right in there, and the whole land mass forms around it. The more you meditate on this, the more you kind of see different aspects to it here. And obviously you've got the Bermuda Triangle again, Easter Island, Hawaii, all these different sites. This is just a sort of neat and tidy version, which you can actually get on Google Earth now if you just type in Beth Hagens, Beth with an E at the end. You can actually get this whole free thing and just click it into Google Earth and you've got it. This just shows you Europe and all the different sort of combinations. This shows you Britain, England. Again here. Yeah, and sorry. And Ireland, yeah. And England. This is just a graphic of the grid, but also some of the very important ley lines and energy systems within England. We don't just get lines, or we get big circles and big triangles as well. But I won't go into that now. It's just showing you that there's lots of the way sites are placed over the landscape, especially in Britain, because obviously that's where I'm from, that's where I've researched, and Ireland. We keep finding all these different systems, landscape, connections, geometries, all connecting up, and I think it's very important. But I guess you'll probably want to see this, which is America. Again, this is William Becker Beth Hagens. It's their graphic. And it just shows you the detail. It's a little bit confusing because it's got all the different state boundaries on it as well, which kind of makes it look a bit confusing. But yeah, this is basically around the Organ Pipe Cactus Monument there. That's way up in Canada, obviously. Bermuda Triangle down there, obviously, and there's all these different lines. Kind of need to have a good look at that to research that. Sedona, people who live in Sedona claim it's there, but actually that's way up there somewhere. But they would, I guess. And this just shows you sort of 3D version, sort of one of the faces, as you can see on that one, is kind of the way it fits over the Americas. Very neat kind of neat thing there. So I love that graphic over there. I think that's a real good summary of the potential and the perfection of the geometry. What's that? Where's that music coming from? And obviously, when you're looking at these kind of geometries in a spherical form, you really got to look at cymatics. And I'm just going to run through this because I think when you start looking at, we all know probably Hans Jenny's work. Was actually a student of Buckminster Fuller. And he was vibrating droplets of water, and he was coming up with all these brilliant geometries. And as the frequency increased, the geometry got more complex. And again, I think as the frequency increased on the planet, the geometry is getting more complex, and we're getting more complex, and the energies are kind of interacting with that. And also, there's evidence in ancient times that they were working with these spherical geometries, which we found here. These have been found all around northern Britain and Ireland, and various other sites. This one actually in France, this one. That one, I think, in Scotland, and there's some in Loughcrew in Ireland. Okay. But again, these are, they're called the Platonic solids technically, but this was a couple of thousand years at least before Plato, although archaeologists call them hunting projectiles. I'd be privileged to be hunted with one of them. But again, what we're finding with these is that if you look at all the different geometries we just saw, they come back again to a combination of all the Platonic solids. And this was worked on by a master geometer called Keith Critchlow, who came up with the system up on the left there, when he worked with all the stone. He didn't know anything about the grid. He just worked with them stone spheres, hundreds of them that were discovered. You can see them in the museums. And again, it matches the Earth grid precisely. So, so I'm just going to finish up here just quickly. This is just a suggestive grid, really. This is an idea when we look at the idea of where the poles used to be, which is in Hudson Bay, which is about 2,000 miles from where they are now. This is the work of Charles Hapgood. Suddenly, if you place the grid and put the poles where they used to be, and say click it round a little bit, suddenly all the most ancient sites on the planet come into being, sort of form. We've got on the image on the right, there's Göbekli Tepe, which is the most ancient megalithic site ever discovered. Baalbek, which is the largest megaliths in the world, and Nabta, which is a stone circle discovered in pre-dynastic Egypt. And this is just a graphic of a Hopi creation myth, which talks about how the creator Taiwa created these two brothers who then created this. One of them created sound and the other one created form to produce the world, and they sent all this energy to the center of the planet, to the crystal at the center, and it all bounced off and created these energy centers around the planet called spots of the fawn, which is, to me, a symbol of how the ancient traditions knew about either the creation process or grid systems, or how energy works around the planet with these geometries. This is a picture my brother put together for my book, which I really like, and I go into more detail about this in the book, so you can check it all out in that. And here's all my bits and bobs. I've got books and stuff like that. If you want to get in contact with me, I've got business cards. So I think, I guess time. Thank you.